It's full speed ahead on the governor's tax plan, though an alternative gets a hearing. A multi-million-dollar state contract and the dispute surrounding it. Medical marijuana, millions at stake, though the way forward is still hazy and unclear as well. Arkansas under a new and decidedly different president. Arkansas Week is next.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week, a full agenda beginning with fiscal policy, moving to marijuana, and a new presidential administration. Benji Hardy joins us from Arkansas Times, where he is a reporter, usually at the Capitol. Andrew DeMillo, the Capitol Bureau Chief of the Associated Press, and Lance Turner, reporter, editor, columnist for Arkansas Business. And thanks to everybody for coming in. Andrew, we had, well, traditionally in Arkansas, customarily governors more or less get their way on tax policy, and it certainly seems that this edition of the General Assembly is no exception.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. The governor's, basically his legislative priority, the tax cut he's proposed for low-income residents, has cleared both a Senate committee and a House committee. Looks like we're going to see floor votes on it as soon as Monday. This is the $50 million tax cut proposal that he's laid out for those making less than $21,000 a year. And it really seems like his strategy, which he'd kind of laid out in the State of the State address last week, where he basically acknowledged that the concern that some Republicans had that this was not as large of a tax cut as they'd like. Basically acknowledged that and said he knows this is more modest than they'd like, and basically has promised in 2 years to seek deeper tax cuts. This proposal includes a task force that's going to come up with recommendations before the 2019 session. And that really has seemed to kind of ease the concerns from some Republicans who really wanted deeper cuts, and it seems like the momentum is on his side right now for this proposal.
Well, there still was room for a hearing, at least, and a very civil, cordial even hearing, for an alternative proposal, and that was the gentleman from Little Rock, Mr. Sabin.
Yeah, Warwick Sabin, a Democrat from Little Rock, and other House Democrats have been backing this idea of basically a state version of the Earned Income Tax Credit. It's a $40 million tax credit that he's proposed, would actually take effect sooner than the governor's tax cut proposal. That also got out of the House Revenue and Tax Committee, which wasn't that much of a surprise since that committee is evenly split between Democrats and Republicans. That's scheduled to come up for a vote, I think, as soon as Monday in the House as well, too. It's going to have a tougher time, obviously, in the House there.
You can't have both.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely seen as a competing proposal. Representative Sabin has said that he's hoping there might be some kind of compromise that can be worked out between the governor and him on these two proposals. Just looking at the numbers, though, its prospects on its own, just given the numbers in the House, the Republicans having a supermajority there, it's going to have a tough road there, and I'm not really sure what compromise there could be. The governor yesterday had said that he's fine with the tax cut package as is, really indicating that he's not really open to tweaking it at this point.
Yeah. So what do we have here? A courtesy to the Democrat by the Republican majority in the House, General Assembly?
It could be. I think the chairman of the committee, Joe Jett, who was a Democrat up until about a month ago and switched over to the Republican Party, he was actually a co-sponsor of this, and he said that he thought it was worth members hearing both of these ideas. I'm not really sure if it's a courtesy as much as trying to avoid things getting bottled up in this committee, just given the fact that it is the only committee in the legislature that's evenly divided between the two.
Yeah, Benji.
I think one thing that's interesting about the governor's plan is just comparing it to the experience in other states that have tried to do much larger tax cuts. And I mean, going back to 2015 for that matter, I mean, Hutchinson's proposals have been, I guess, modest, you would say, compared to the experience of Governor Brownback in Kansas, Louisiana,
Oklahoma.
And some of the noises that you heard from some conservative legislators about these tax cuts aren't large enough really go back to that ideological position that the path to prosperity and growth is cutting taxes, because that puts money into the hands of wealthier people, job creators, that gets the economy going. And you really have to wonder, I think, how much of the governor's, the sort of contours of his plan were shaped by watching that not really come to fruition in Kansas in the way
or how much of his caution, anyway, was shaped by what happened in those states.
Certainly, I mean, they faced, tremendous budget problems. They're not seeing the revenue projected growth that was promised from the outset. And I mean, of course, Governor Brownback is saying, like, just wait, it's coming down the line. But so, I mean, that's an interesting thing to keep in mind when you think about the pushback from the sort of right wing of the party, fiscally speaking. And you also wonder about those legislators, for that matter. I mean, are they watching the experience of those other states as well?
Well, clearly, so let's go over to Lance real quick and get kind of an update on the economy, because clearly for the last couple of 3 years, it's been on the upswing. As we go to press, as it were, this morning, the state reported a 0.1% downward click in the jobless rate, 3.9%. It's full employment.
Yeah, and it's been for the
Arkansas, of course.
Right, for Arkansas, and for the entirety of the year, it was sort of a big dip in the first few months of the year, then it kind of leveled out again, and it's been on the slow, steady pace that economists have projected it would be for the last several years, and then we've seen some other indications that things are picking up a little bit. Of course, the key metric that everyone's watching are those sales tax collections on a monthly basis. And that's what'll be interesting, because the other piece of this, of course, is the governor saying, I promise to revisit tax cuts and tax reform, in fact, in 2 years. And that was apparently part of the deal that has cleared the way for this $50 million tax cut now. And so, what will the economy look like in 2 years? What will those tax collections look like in 2 years? Will we still feel good about going in and finding more places to cut, perhaps those bigger $100 million cuts that some people have thrown around? But so far, everyone is sort of cautiously optimistic. Some of the numbers on a monthly basis haven't quite been what they would like, and that, I think, is why there was some caution early on, even the week before the session, in fact, when they were signaling, hey, we may not even do anything on tax cuts, and that might have been part of the deal-making process to get this committee to look 2 years down the road. But they're watching those numbers closely, I think, because they don't want to be in a situation like a Kansas where stuff isn't coming online perhaps as quickly as they thought it would.
Well, vis-a-vis sales taxes, it's worth noting that the gentleman who sits in Congress for the 3rd District, Mr. Womack, has again put his shoulder behind legislation to collect taxes on internet sales, which are costing every state's or most state treasuries anyway, if not all of them,
right,
hundreds of millions of dollars in sales tax revenue.
Yeah, and that's been interesting. That's been an interesting debate to watch too, because Republicans for so long have been we don't want to raise taxes on anything. But this is an area of the economy that I think most people are coming around to, thinking it's time to do something. Even on a state level, I think there's been some action here in the legislature to collect some sales taxes on the back end from some of these online entities that have not, their sales have been untaxed. And you're hearing a lot of that on the municipal level too. I think the city of Little Rock has been talking a lot about, whether rightly or wrongly, they believe that a lot of their city problems, or in terms of looking at their receipts, they have been impacted by competition from online retailers as well. So you're seeing it in all pockets of government. Mr. Womack has been pushing various plans for that since he's been in the Congress, and maybe now there's going to be some movement on that.
We'll see. Why don't we just pause right there and take a look at the Arkansas economy, because it was not certainly for banking, it was a pretty good quarter.
No, we've some of our key banks who have been on a tear recently in terms of growth turned in some end of the year fourth quarter numbers, all looking very strong. Simmons, First National of Pine Bluff, Home Bank Shares in Conway, the parent of Centennial Bank, both seeing growth on the order of 20 and 30% year over year in terms of fourth quarter profit. Both doing very well in terms of acquisitions. They've taken advantage of, in recent years, of some of the troubles that other banks have had to sort of go out and get bigger and make acquisitions, and they continue to do so. Both of those banks, in fact, Simmons and Home Bank Shares, are nearing the $10 billion asset mark, which is a key moment for them because it opens up all kinds of new regulatory considerations that they have to make. And both of those CEOs, George Macris and particularly Johnny Allison, have planned and done this in a way that they're sort of creeping up on the $10 billion mark to sort of get ready for it. All the staff they have to bring on, all the things they have to put in place to meet those regulatory requirements, so that they're not just diving across that line and getting hit with all this new stuff. But both of those banks will cross $10 billion this year, and they'll join Arvest Bank and Bank of the Ozarks with being in that sort of stratosphere of banking.
Housing.
Yes, housing continuing to do well. We saw in November a 24% increase in home sales. Northwest Arkansas continues to be a hotbed of home sales as well. That region, of course, is growing, and everyone knows that. And so we've seen some recovery there as well, although Arkansas, of course, was never hit with the housing crisis that perhaps other states were hit with.
Okay, back to the Capitol and another matter of millions of dollars. We have the Little Rock advertising community dropped any pretense, I guess, of surface cordiality anyway in recent weeks, not months. And what's involved, Andrew, is an advertising contract with the state, one of several big multi-million-dollar contracts.
That's right. This is a $34.5 million contract to handle the advertising for the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery. Now, when you say $34 million, it doesn't mean that the company that has been awarded this contract, CJRW, is going to get $34 million to run it. There's fees and commissions, and there's ad spend involved in that figure. But yeah, it has been controversial for a number of reasons. Two other ad agencies that were involved in that pitch for that business have protested the awarding of that contract to CJRW on a number of different basis. But one is that CJRW has a conflict of interest because it also works with Oaklawn, the racetrack in Hot Springs, which has been pointed out in the Scholarship Lottery's own documentation as a competitor. So there's conflict of interest questions there. There's also some questions about just how the procurement process worked, how it progressed. There was even some scoring irregularities that they noticed. That wouldn't change the outcome of first, second, and third place, but there were some irregularities nonetheless. And so it's been, since the end of last year, it's been sort of a little bit of a controversy. I think the bigger questions that it's raising are, the procurement process in general, which we've seen some problems with even before the holidays with the youth services issue, and then I think lottery in general, with its other contract with Camelot, has also been under audit, and some charges that contract is more advantageous to Camelot than it is to the lottery. So it's kind of a perfect storm that sort of culminated this week when that contract, the ad contract, went for review in front of the legislature, and the legislators declined to review it and essentially sent it back. And so once again, we've got a procurement process that stalls at the legislature, and what we do about that, I don't know. It's frustrating for the agencies that are involved. It's frustrating certainly for Bishop Woosley at the lottery, who just wants to get his job done. And it's frustrating to the governor as well, who's seeing another contract sort of stall out at the legislature. And it's also frustrating to legislators who have been reading about all the controversy about this contract, and then it comes before them, and what, are they supposed to rubber stamp it and move on and ignore these issues, or how are they supposed to engage with that, I guess?
Well, they certainly got the muscle to do so now.
Yeah, this is, like Lance said, this is an issue that this is not going to be. This isn't the first time we've seen it. We saw it with youth services, and this isn't going to be the last time.
Yeah.
This is definitely a fight that's going to be happening regularly between the executive and legislative branches over how much of a role lawmakers need to have in the contract process, and just with what we've seen the legislature in recent years taking more of a role in the rulemaking process, regulations, and now we're seeing that happen with contracts. The governor's definitely expressed frustration about it. He had expressed, definitely expressed frustration when this happened with youth services. And so I think we're going to see this happen more, and there's going to be an attempt somehow to redefine this role more than it's been redefined already.
Well, when I said muscle, I mean it's legal muscle that the legislature has that it didn't really have before.
The legislative review power that they have to hold these things up, yeah, and I think, I mean, it's, to be clear, it's a different sort of question than the actual merits of the contract or the actual merits of the youth services contract back in December. It's about what role do you want this body of legislators to have in the process of state government. I mean, theoretically, the executive has the power to over procurement because these are things that should not be decided by 20 people in a room, because it's so difficult to make an executive decision about something like that when you have different legislators with different competing local or regional interests.
And 20 people who are susceptible to lobbying by the companies, who may want to have their say in who gets the contract. That's, you go through this whole process, and then it goes before the legislature, and then, are they going to be lobbied now to maybe not review a contract or to let it go or whatever? It raises all kinds of interesting scenarios.
I think also, I mean, this is what we've seen so far is fairly mild compared to the potential for mischief there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and in part because the governor has, I would say, a fairly tight rein in the legislature. I mean, we assume, but I mean, theoretically, they could be holding up stuff left and right.
Right.
Yeah. What happens when this becomes a critical service? That this hasn't shut down the lottery. This hasn't shut down youth services. But what happens when this holds up something even more major, something even more pricier than this?
We continue to watch, as you, sir, in particular, have been watching the progress, if you want to call it that, toward enacting or implementing medical marijuana.
Right. And,
where do we stand? I mean, it's still.
We saw the most significant development this last week, I suppose, was the legislature moving forward with a bill to delay the timelines that were contained within the constitutional amendment that were passed by voters back in November. And that gave some breathing room to the Medical Marijuana Commission, which has been meeting sort of overtime these past 5 or 6 weeks to try to craft a set of rules involving licensing of the cultivation centers and dispensaries that are going to be, I mean, that is, they're creating an industry from scratch, essentially, by distributing these licenses. Previously, they had to have those rules in place by March 9th and begin accepting applications by June. Pretty tight turnaround, and now they've been given a little extra breathing room. Nonetheless, there's so many ins and outs of this, and when designing this new industry, in terms of implications both for the private sector and for all sorts of state functions. Since Lance was mentioning banking a second ago, there's a sort of interesting aside to all of this that marijuana businesses can't access traditional lines of credit. And so the commission has set in place some pretty monumentally high standards, like asset tests for cultivators, especially, to get into the business. You have to prove $1 million in assets plus $500,000 in cash on top of that. And the rationale there, whether or not those numbers are too high or not, I won't comment on, but the rationale there is that you have to have cash to do this business, since banks, you can't get loans from banks. Right.
What's the next corner to be turned, or the step to be taken?
Well, so the commission is plugging away at developing these licensing rules, and those meetings continue to be very well attended. Lots of people interested in their work. At the same time, the Department of Health and ABC, Alcoholic Beverage Control, is working on other rules, and those three entities have to sort of develop this interlocking puzzle of rules that cover everything from packaging the stuff to regulating how the businesses sell it, how it's advertised, security. So all that is ongoing. But it's all regulatory. The big unknown is whether the legislature is still going to try to throw in another wrench and mess with the existing amendment as it is. So far, there hasn't been anything too controversial, but there's still talk of tampering with the amendment in some pretty significant ways. Rumors of levying an additional tax. The governor said he does not support that, but it's still out there. Rumors also of limiting the ability of dispensaries to grow plants, which would be a pretty major departure from what the text of the amendment says.
All right, going to move on. Let's mention abortion, because it almost certainly Well, it was. It was destined to come up, and in fact it has, and came out of committee, Andrew.
Yeah, the House Public Health Committee advanced legislation that would ban a very common second trimester abortion procedure. It's heading to the House now. It's very likely to pass the House, just given the makeup there. There's a lot of criticism over this ban, which has been enacted in other states. From groups like Planned Parenthood, who say this is another attack on a woman's right to choose. I'm expecting this will get through pretty easily. The governor had said before the session he was likely to support this legislation. The big question is going to be: is this going to be another prohibition that's going to draw a court challenge? Arkansas has seen that happen before.
Certainly, is it not?
Yeah, it's drawn challenges in other states too. So, that's kind of the bigger question: is is this going to be open to a court challenge? Is it going to withstand a court challenge? Just given the makeup of the legislature and given the legislature's history on abortion legislation, even before they had these expanded GOP numbers in the legislature, I think its path is pretty clear through both chambers at this point.
We will continue to watch now, but we are taping our program per usual at mid-morning on Friday. By the time it reaches air, we will have a new president of the United States. Lance, you guys in particular have been doing a lot of reporting on what's the likely fallout, immediate anyway, from a Trump administration. Of course, healthcare is the top of the list.
It is the top of the list.
Undecideds.
Right, absolutely. And so you've got, everyone in the healthcare industry in Arkansas, particularly the folks including the folks at UAMS, every rural hospital in the state, all kind of wondering how this healthcare reform repeal is going to shake out. And I don't think anyone really knows that just yet. You tend to get different projections from members of the Trump administration, and of course Congress wants to do its own thing as well. Everyone though is paying close attention to it. I think there's several issues at play. Among them is what's going to happen to the Medicare reimbursements that were cut to make way for Obamacare. The timeline for all of this coming. Are people going to be left uninsured for a period of time? Hospitals are saying, UAMS says that healthcare reform means about $65 million to them per year. And when you take that away, that means cuts in services and in people at that hospital. And so everyone is kind of on edge as to what will happen here. Obviously here in Arkansas, the posture of the governor and the legislature seems to be, going ahead and approving Arkansas Works again, reauthorizing that fairly easily, working with the incoming Trump administration on whatever waivers they can get to get more freedom and flexibility with what they can do. The governor on CNBC this morning seemed very, welcoming of any kind of reform. He says, we're ready to move now. We could do something in 90 days if that's what needs to happen. We're ready to make that transition to a new federal partnership regarding Medicaid and the rest of the program. So I think everyone's kind of sitting on go, but no one knows what direction that we're headed in just yet.
Andrew, he still wants the money.
Yeah, and I think it's unclear whether or not we're going to avoid another kind of knockdown, drag-out fight over Arkansas Works, over the Medicaid expansion. Every year this has come up. It's been a huge fight, and I'm not sure if they're going to be able to avoid it this time around on the promise that the president-elect, or president by the time this airs, and Congress are going to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I think the wish of the governor, of legislative leaders, would be that they reauthorize it and deal with whatever questions come up later on what the new program will be, what the replacement for Affordable Care Act will be later in another session, maybe even a special session. I'm not sure, given the numbers that we've seen and what happened last year, kind of the procedural hurdles they had to go through to pass it last year. I don't think they're going to be able to avoid another fight over it this time.
Well, the national organs, though, keep reporting a growing sense of unease among the Republican majorities in the Congress. Wait a minute, if we're going to do anything, let's make sure we don't kill ourselves in the next midterm elections, is basically what they're saying. We can't pull the rug. We've got 36 Republican governors, I think, most of which have got an expansion on them.
Well, though Arkansas still remains in the minority among southern states as far as doing that expansion, and I think, arguably that puts Hutchinson in an unusual position as far as the Trump administration goes, in terms of saying, we want this, we do want the money to continue, we want this match rate to continue. In my opinion, he's sort of evaded, saying that directly by talking about other changes that are more amenable to him that he hopes to see from the Trump administration, like block grants, like allowing some of the work requirements and more stringent measures that the Obama administration denied. But, you have to wonder behind the scenes, is the governor arguing for this? Is he saying clearly to the people in the incoming administration, we need this money to continue?
Nothing, though, is likely to happen much out of Washington anyway in the next fiscal year, which starts October 1.
Well, even that, there are conflicting signals on what the strategy is going to be. Is it still going to be repeal and delay, repeal and replace, do it at the same time? And that puts states like Arkansas that have expanded Medicaid in a very difficult position when they're trying to figure out their budgets. The session may wrap up before we have a clear answer from Washington on what's going to happen with the Affordable Care Act and with the millions of people getting coverage nationwide right now.
Yeah, exactly. Congress knows really at this point not much more than what the Arkansas General Assembly knows about what's likely to evolve here. Guys, thanks to you for coming in. We're out of time. As always, thanks to you for watching. See you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.